Welcome everyone to our mock preliminary hearing. Let's please be respectful today to our presenters, our attorneys, and everyone present. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Attorney Angelo Papa, whose daughter Annie actually attended Kennedy Catholic. Mr. Papa was a former all-conference Newcastle Quad A WPIL football player. He was also on the championship team. Mr. Papa is also a former teacher, a former coach, administrator, and board president in Newcastle. Mr. Papa received his Bachelor of Science and his Master's of Science in Education and School Administration. He also received his Juris Doctorate degree at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh at the University School of Law Light program, while also being a high school assistant principal. He was also a former assistant prosecutor in Lawrence County with a 90% conviction rate. He's also the owner and founder of Signature Hill Legal, and Summits Coalition Registry, which is a nonprofit substance abuse productions company. Everyone put your hands together for Mr. Angelo Papa.
Thank you, Jeff, for your kind words. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Now, if you can't hear anybody, you let us know. Now, we're going to move our program along. I'm keeping track of my agenda here because I know that me and these gentlemen and ladies here and my colleagues are all that stands between you and your Christmas vacation. So we promise to use the time wisely and quickly. The other issue that we have here is I want to make sure that you know that this is a real-life movie. If you see the movie jumping around, it's not because we got some Class B movie for you. It was made on a homemade camera by the students themselves, which is most impacting for this lesson that you have, that this is a real-life situation. Every person in this movie are real people, just like you. Now, I do have to give you some kind of warning. Some of you may have already been touched by tragedy in DUI accidents or something like that. There will actually be, the camera will keep rolling, even though it flew through the window in this crash scene. And if any of you have unusual sensitivities to that, for whatever reason, please feel free. Mr. Lynn has offered that you are free to tiptoe out and not watch this movie. You might be wondering, why would somebody be bringing this message to you on the eve of your Christmas vacation? Because we believe it's a duty we have. I've struggled with this myself since I've seen this movie from the person who lets us use it in California. And I've said to myself, I think if I'm going to err on the other side and maybe upset somebody before Christmas so that I know that maybe somehow, in some way, we prevented something. The last part of our program will immediately, we will go to a preliminary hearing, which is going to set the stage. And it's going to set the stage for our April 25th mock trial by jury. This is the precursor. Last year, some of you participated and you saw the preliminary hearing. This year, the preliminary hearing has already taken place. And I'm going to assume the role of a newscast reporter, asking the defense attorney, asking the magisterial justice and judge, asking the prosecutor some questions to develop some key points. And time permitting, we'll let you ask some questions also. But after that's over, then we're going to show you the last 10 minutes of the video. And then at the end, we're going to end with a song which is very, very appropriate. And it all goes back to a couple basic themes. 1, do something. 2, if not now, when? 3, if not me, then who? And we want you to pay attention to that song. It's a central part of our program today. So before you're dismissed to go back, you'll hear a song play that we're going to play through. And that's very important for the message we're giving you. So the message is, when you walked in with the War Eagle playing, and I think the Kennedy symbol is an eagle, correct? Okay? And I got to believe somebody in here that's an athlete has once upon a time listened to War Eagle to get excited for a game. We want you to get excited to do something. And what are you going to do? Number 1, you're going to talk to somebody before they drive a car over this holiday. Number 2, you won't get in that car. Number 3, you're not going to be the person who drives that car under the slightest bit of influence. Okay? So that said, and I'm running a little bit short, I'm going to quickly get ready. If our camera crew is ready over there, are we ready to show the movie, Kathy? Okay, go ahead. We can proceed now. And we'll be stopping it at 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Remember, it's a real-life movie. get into the characters. That these are kids just like you. They do the same things you do. They're going to do the same things you do. They've done the same things you do. Some of you have been lucky and some of you have been not, and some of you have never experienced that. But the most important power of this video, for all the other reasons we're going to get into, and the legal applications, is that it is life as you know it. Even the jumpy camera. And Kathy, are we, once upon a time, if you even eject it and start over, you can. Dr. Iacino is like really skilled at that. He made it talk last time. So, anyway, going back to the video, what's going to happen after this video, if it ever reoccurs again? And we're prepared if it doesn't. But when we get to this video, this scene will conclude. When the scene concludes, we will immediately go to a preliminary hearing that has already happened. Now, the preliminary hearing is what's called a sufficiency hearing, and we'll get into that later, unless the video can't be resurrected for today. And the preliminary hearing is a sufficiency hearing in which we were lucky enough, like in real life, I'm going to become Bill O'Reilly, Greta Van Susteren, or Martha McCallum, or I guess I'm revealing some kind of what I watch, huh? Otherwise, I'm going to be a newscaster of some sort. I'm going to play a role in your little experiment today, and I'm going to ask them questions that I think a reporter should ask, okay? And it helps that I once upon a time taught school. It helps that I once upon a time was a kid. It helps that I once upon a time was a high school administrator, a prosecutor, because I want to ask the questions that you're going to relate to. Because when this is all over, all charges will be bound over. It may seem harsh to you when our defendant comes into court paralyzed from the waist down, that she's now about to be prosecuted in addition to all the things that have happened to her for, among other things, homicide, manslaughter, driving under the influence. We don't even want to get to all the civil liabilities that are out there for this particular driver. All of that whole cascade of bad outcomes comes down to watching this movie here, and when you leave here, knowing that there are some choices you can make to eliminate any possibility of that happening. Not completely impossible, obviously. You can be innocently in another car and have something happen, but that's the message that we've been trying to get to you for over the years that we've come here. That's what Substance Coalition Summit Registry is all about. Our nonprofit corporation is using our collective experience in education, law, medicine, community, and life itself to find another voice, a way to get you a message. Every once in a while in court, Mr. Lindsay can tell you everything goes wrong. And you need to be prepared to sit there and pretend like you wanted it to happen. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm going to put a spin on this and tell you that's exactly what we wanted to happen, because we want to show you that we are always prepared for other things. So Kathy is the person who is going to obviously get us corrected. And let's go back onto that issue. And we got to use our time wisely here, because remember, we're not going to delay your departure to your Christmas vacation. Now, going back to the central issues up here, I may, while Kathy is going, ask one of our prosecuting attorney to come up here now at the podium, and we can talk to her and ask her some of the questions that I would be asking. And if you want to approach the podium, thank you very much. And I have the pleasure of standing next to Stephanie Lauterbach. She is a Lawrence County resident, and Mercer County stole her from us, and she's an assistant prosecutor at Mercer County. She is an undergraduate at Clarion University of Pennsylvania, Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. Law school, she went to the University of Akron Law School. I was accepted there once too. Nice. And that was several years ago. I probably have socks older than you. She's also in private practice for a while, and now she's an assistant district attorney in Mercer County working for Robert Cochins. And I want to make sure I put a plug in for Robert. Robert stopped his busy day to help us to be part of this 3 times now. And he gave us a very experienced prosecutor. In fact, she is so pushed as far as making sure that she has an aggressive agenda. She was actually in court already this morning, right?
No, not this morning.
But
Later this afternoon.
Later this afternoon, okay. Now, we want to make sure, I could ask you a couple questions that when we get to the preliminary hearing would have happened after the movie, but because we have these technical glitches, I'll pick them up now.
Okay.
As a prosecutor, I find it, now I'm an attorney, I'm a reporter at this time, I'm changing hats up here, okay? So as a reporter, I'm hopefully asking questions you might ask. Isn't it harsh, when we wheel this defendant in a wheelchair, isn't it harsh to now try her for vehicular homicide? Is that what you're going to try her for?
That's correct.
That was bound over today in front of the Honorable Judge Antos.
Correct.
Okay. Also, manslaughter,
That's correct.
driving under the influence.
Yes.
And we know that if she's convicted of any of those, it'll be wide open for civil liabilities, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you tell them why you don't think it's harsh to do that?
Well, at first glance, a lot of people feel emotional when they see an individual, mainly a defendant, sitting in a wheelchair. They might have some emotions, and just like the reporter had stated, they might not want to move forward. But we have to remember that the Commonwealth has a duty to protect its citizens and to enforce its laws. And one way that the laws are enforced is through prosecution. We prosecute people who violate the law because we want to penalize them, first of all, but also because we want to deter future crime. If there's no consequences for actions, people are more likely, to break the law if they know there's no consequences. But also, as the Commonwealth, victims are citizens of the Commonwealth. And so the Commonwealth owes a duty to these citizens to keep them safe. And also, if the victim is alleging that a crime has been committed, the Commonwealth has a duty to investigate this crime. And once it's been investigated and it's determined that there has been a crime, the Commonwealth owes a duty to the victim to prosecute the one responsible with a thorough investigation and a thorough prosecution. And that's what we're doing in this case. And for those people who might say, well, this is too harsh still, I think you should put yourself in the shoes of the victims in this case, mainly the parents of the young man who's now deceased. Imagine what they're going through and the loss they're suffering. And so essentially, it's in the interest of justice that we are proceeding in this case with these charges.
And of course, we know that as human beings, we have compassionate moments. You're a human being. In addition, we just said that up until recently, you weren't even a prosecutor. But now that you're a prosecutor, we're in an advocatory system. Is that not so? Where somebody is supposed to advocate that position, and then somebody like Mr. Lindsay will advocate the defendant's position. And on what we call the anvil of litigation in a courtroom, the decision on whether or not somebody is guilty will be decided by peers, correct?
Correct.
But as far as prosecuting, you have a duty, if the elements are met by the proof as presented in Justice Ansos' courtroom, then there would be sufficient evidence, and you don't have a right to say, this girl looks a little bit too pitiful, or this gentleman. How would you ever get justice if we started getting into that subjective analysis?
That's true, and it's not that is irrelevant. The situation the defendant's in is not totally irrelevant. However, when deciding to prosecute, it is kind of put aside. Essentially, if the defense counsel wanted to argue, well, look what happened to the defendant, she's injured herself, stuff like that, that can be done before a judge, but that's done at sentencing. If, in fact, the Commonwealth is able to prove its case, all the elements beyond a reasonable doubt, then at that point, the defendant would be found guilty, and then they could present, to a judge why they should get a less severe penalty, essentially. But that would be up to a judge.
And again, we talk about, and we will talk to Mr. Lindsay, who is a lawyer's lawyer. I mean, you have no clue the lawyer that we're going to bring to the podium here, and I can't wait to introduce him. And Justice Ansos is going to tell you that beyond the charging with a crime, that's what we call prosecutorial discretion, correct?
Correct.
Beyond charging the crime, we now get into a whole panoply of constitutional issues. And Kathy, you can give me the high sign when you get to the part where we left off. Feel free to let it go. I can talk over top of that. Yeah, and I'll keep going. Now, there's a whole panoply of due process rights that are aimed to protect somebody like this alleged defendant, and that is 1, pretrial motions, 2, a bill of particulars, a discovery request, a habeas corpus, various omnibus motions, a pretrial conference, and that's where some discretion starts to work in, and a plea offer that you might offer with some of these mitigating circumstances, correct?
Correct.
And that's where the electability of your district attorney comes in, where you basically have a say again. And then once we get past that, we now get to a trial by jury, and you've got to get through a guy like him sitting there. And he's not about to let his defendant be proven, because not only do they have to be guilty, they have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a ways to go, because if any single juror out of all those 12 refuses to say guilty, one of them can prevent that girl from being guilty, correct?
That's correct.
So when we're saying that it tips toward, wow, that doesn't seem too fair, it tips back again to the best that human beings can do. And I submit to you that I'm no expert. I just have lived longer than most of you, and I'm a student of history. I think it's the finest system in the world. It's not perfect. It's human. It can't be perfect. But that's how it works from the prosecution side. Now, one other question I'm dying to ask you.
Sure.
How about the adults who furnished the alcohol?
Well, it's still early in the investigation in this case. However, there is an indication that it appears that there was an adult. Obviously, someone over the age of 21 had to purchase this alcohol for this party. So if it ends up that the parents of one of these students had purchased the alcohol, yes, the Commonwealth would be interested in pursuing charges for furnishing alcohol to a minor. Essentially, all we would have to prove is that this parent or this adult knowingly and intentionally provided the alcohol to this party. And so I believe that in that case, the maximum penalty would be 1 year in prison. That would be the maximum, as well as a $1,000 fine.
And also civil liabilities. There'd be lawyers lining up forever to sue people on this, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't care about that. If they did it, they have to do it blind justice, correct?
Correct.
And so these adults that furnish this alcohol are what the prosecutor would call a person or persons of interest right now, right?
That's true.
There's an
Yes.
investigation going on. That's not good news. Okay, are we ready to go, Kathy?
Yes.
Thank you so much, and we'll go. As to repeat those words of Dan Rather, in an instant, everyone's life changes. So, we are now fast forwarding, and we will show you the remainder just before you leave here, and the aftermath. If we can now, we're going to, gentlemen, if you could approach the podium one at a time as I call you, I'm going to ask, this is months later now in life, the preliminary hearing. Our defendant is seated there. In our hypothetical, the driver survived. And maybe a round of applause for her to participate in this, please. It'll give you a chance to breathe a little bit. Thank you. Okay. Now she is going to be charged, and the prosecutor, again, could you approach the podium real quick, because I want to make sure I don't miss the charges. She is going to be charged with vehicular homicide.
That's correct.
She is charged and was now bound over. She's charged with manslaughter.
Correct.
She's charged with DUI.
Correct.
She's probably going to be charged with reckless driving.
More than likely, yes.
Okay. Anything else?
I believe that would cover it at this
Depending on her age, what would her blood alcohol limit need to be?
For her age, any amount of alcohol.
Underage, 0.02.
0.02, right?
Right? Magistrate? Yeah. 0.02, young ladies and gentlemen, not the legal limit that applies to adults, okay? And that the persons who supplied this alcohol, that house, they are persons of interest right now.
That's correct, yes.
Correct. Thank you so very much. And we would ask the magistrate to approach the podium for our news conference, sir. This is the Honorable Judge Ron Antos. He's a homegrown guy in your county, a former policeman. He's seen it all. And Magistrate or District Justice Antos, if you'd approach the mic so that we can hear you, because I'm wired and you're not. Sir, the preliminary hearing has just taken place.
That's correct.
And what was the result of the preliminary hearing?
All charges that were brought forth by the Commonwealth were held to the next term of the Court of Common Pleas.
And Justice Antos, how long have you been a judge?
9 years.
And how long have you been a policeman?
I was a former police officer for 34 years.
Where at?
City of Hermitage.
Okay. Now, do you have any doubt that if this had come before you and this testimony had taken place, that these charges would have been bound over in real life?
Probably so.
Okay, so we know this trial that's coming in April is about as real as it could get if she was lucky enough to survive the crash, not like the gentleman in the real movie, correct?
That's correct.
So all of this is just the beginning of her legal problems.
That's correct. Just the beginning.
Now, we know that we had a preliminary hearing. Does that mean she's guilty?
No.
What does it mean then?
It means that the Commonwealth provided enough information to me to hold those charges to the next term of Court of Common Pleas. What the Commonwealth has to do is prove what is known as a prima facie case. That means on the face of the testimony, I have to believe two things: that the crimes occurred and that the defendant was the person responsible. If I hear that, I hold it to court, meaning common pleas. If I don't hear that, I dismiss what charges that the defendant was placed under arrest for. And you have to understand, probable cause has to be basically proven to me. And what probable cause is, those are indicators that police officers use or law enforcement officers use to bring charges or even a stop against the defendant. For example, if you're traveling down a road at night, the officer sees you weaving on the highway. Let's say you're weaving outside of the fog line, which would be to your right on the berm, and the center dotted line are the solid double yellow lines. And maybe you have a tail light out. That's probable cause or an indicator that I can stop that vehicle. So indicators have to be brought to me, or elements of the crime, for me to listen to, for me to hold them to common pleas court.
And then basically that leaves your jurisdiction, and any sympathy or anything like that is totally irrelevant now. If they're bound over, that's for what we call downtown, correct?
That's correct.
And when we as attorneys, judges, and prosecutors and defense attorneys say downtown, we mean the Court of Common Pleas, basically.
Correct.
Okay, and so this case is headed downtown.
Yes, it is.
And Judge Antos, you've been always a very spirited member of this community, supported this school all the time. Anytime you're asked to come here, we would be remiss if we didn't give you a few seconds to tell the kids some kind of parting message that you would have, because I know you have to get about your busy schedule before you leave. Could you give them something in a few seconds so we can, before we get to our next speaker?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Paper. And thanks for having me today. In my career, I've seen a lot. I've seen this. I've investigated everything from a disorderly conduct to murder. This is vehicular homicide. I happen to be an accident reconstructionist and one of the first in Mercer County. Back in 1980, in the Hermitage Police Department, we formed a traffic unit. So every fatality or major accident that occurred, I investigated it, myself and my partner. I've seen a lot. I'm not standing up here telling you what to do. You all, I assume, dressed yourselves this morning. That tells me, and you look good, other than those Duke guys. Anyhow, I love Duke, so don't take that the wrong way, gentlemen. That tells me you have common sense. I'm not standing up here saying don't drink. That's not my business. That's your business. And maybe the ones who take care of you business. But I can see the tragedy that it can lead to, because it happens to be the #1 killer of people your age group. And when you drive under the influence, and because you're new drivers, because of your age, you don't have much driving experience. And the first things you learn as a driver when you're sober are the first things to go when you're driving impaired. I only make this suggestion to you. If you are going to induce some alcohol or a controlled substance, be very careful when you get behind the wheel of that car. You're not talking a revolver. You're talking a 2,500-pound bullet that can be coming at me, my wife, and my grandchildren. I caution you, if you have to ingest something to have a good time, and I've been saying this for years, you better look in the mirror. It's very important to think about that. If you have to take something to have a good time, and believe me, I like having a good time. I'm a Youngstown State grad. I belong to a fraternity. I saw guys in my fraternity that probably smoked up half of Peru. I did not. And I won't stand here and say, and I didn't inhale. I didn't. The point I'm trying to make, if you gotta take something to have a good time, unless it's for medicinal purposes, look in the mirror. And if you see somebody that is impaired, pick them up, lend them a hand or her a hand. Don't let them crawling behind that wheel, even if it causes a diming and a mile. If you got to call a parent, if you can't get them stopped, then you do that. Oh, I'm going to get them in trouble. They're already in trouble when they're stoned or drunk. Trouble is, it's there. You got to help them. Do not let them crawl in behind the wheel of a car. I've seen it. I've lived it. Again, I'm only giving you that information. I'm not telling you to do anything. You make up your own minds. I wish you well. Merry Christmas to you all. Thanks for having me.
Justice, Judge Antos touched upon one thing. We're known by many names. We keep changing the name we're known by, but one of them is from our curriculum director, Dr. Iacino, that we stole from your school last year. And it's called Once is All It Takes. And once is all it takes, I think, touched upon your idea. You have to put something in you. People, that first drink, which you may have designed to be your only drink, now has affected your ability to remember that you were only going to drink one. And it leads to the lack of control on the second one. And they seem to graduate backwards. I'm no doctor, but I've watched a lot of people drink. And I'm telling you, once is literally all it takes. Same thing with that choice on whose car you ride in. Thank you so much, Judge Antos. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next person to the podium for our press release, I always tell people he needs no introduction, but he basically does, because he's been a silent soldier out there in the legal profession for a long time. But what you need to know is this gentleman has a huge, busy practice. And the fact that I could get him to come clear from Butler every time we have something at the drop of the hat is only where our gratitude begins. He wrote the legal script that goes with our mock trial, the trial that's going to take place. There are a series of facts which we'll give your teachers, including this disc if you want to have other lessons from it. And Al Lindsay is literally very much an amateur performer, too. He basically is the playwright for this thing. So it's much better this year because I don't do it and he does. And I got him to do that, and I know he was very busy when he chose to do that. Mr. Lindsay has a history degree. He graduated from Washington and Jefferson College, and that's in Little Washington, PA, I believe. And that was quite a while ago. I had to sneak that in there. Okay, and Mr. Lindsay also became the first full-time prosecutor at Butler in Butler County as an assistant prosecutor. And as an assistant prosecutor, he's tried some very famous public corruption cases. He later became a member of the U.S. Attorney's Office in 1975, and his cases, the convictions he has in public corruption, are incredible. I mean, Mr. Lindsay teaches trial tactics at the University of Pittsburgh to this day. And Mr. Lindsay is not only a lawyer's lawyer, he is a person's person. He is the kindest, firmest, best communicator I have ever been the pleasure of being involved with. We teach CLE classes to other attorneys, so I'm going to quickly step back into character and be a newspaper reporter again to ask him some questions from the preliminary hearing, and then if we have time, hopefully he'll give us some comments before we get ready for our adjournment and watch the last 10 minutes of the video. So, Mr. Lindsay, would you approach the podium? Attorney Al Lindsay, please show him a proper Kennedy Catholic welcome.
We want to make some remarks at the end.
Sure. Mr. Lindsay, you are the defense attorney for the young lady?
Yes.
And are you disappointed that the charges were bound over?
Well, not really, because this is a preliminary hearing, and at a preliminary hearing, the burden of proof of the Commonwealth is very low. It's does the evidence show that this person probably committed a crime, if you believe the evidence. So we expected this result.
So the trial is apparently, according to the court calendars and our investigation here at the Fox News channel, we have determined that the trial will most likely come up in April.
Yes, that's my understanding.
2015. May we ask you, are you planning on having your defendant testify?
That's a decision that will not be made until the trial, and it's not my decision. That's a decision that's going to be made by the client based on everything. A lot of people get the idea that if a client doesn't testify, it must mean he's guilty. There are many reasons for an individual not to testify. You know, people think that they can tell when someone's telling the truth. You get a person on the jury and they say, the guy didn't look at me, so therefore he must not be telling the truth. All that stuff is bunk. There are a lot of reasons that people should not testify because they're not good, they're nervous, they're upset. Some people, when they're very nervous, laugh. They just laugh out of nervousness. Maybe some of you people have seen that. And then people think that it's not serious, things of that nature. So there are reasons for people not to testify that have nothing to do with guilt or innocence.
And so I'm assuming her Sixth Amendment rights are going to keep you from going any further into your upcoming defense. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, well, we won't ask you any more of that. And we will conclude our interview now and ask you if you would like to make some comments to the kids before we get to the rest of the movie.
I would be remiss if I didn't make a comment. I said to Stephanie, there's a lot of fine-looking young Catholics out there today. And I couldn't help but think of a story. And what I want to tell you a story are the district magistrate judge told you about going to a party and drinking and driving. I want to take you a step beyond. I want to tell you a story, and what I'm telling you is absolutely true. I live out in the country, way down in Butler County, almost in the woods. 2 doors down, there's a family that I have known all my life. About 10 years ago, they had 2 daughters. They had a son and 2 daughters. The 2 daughters had just graduated from Knox High School. They were cheerleaders. They were beautiful, and they were smart. They got a scholarship to Indiana University, and they went off to IUP. It was just about this time. It was Christmas time, and they were invited to a party at IUP. Now, we live in Butler County. It's about an hour away. Their parents suggested they should not go. They were only 18. They shouldn't go to this party, but they went to the party. The brother took them to the party. The older brother thought he'd, do a favor for his younger sisters. There's someone talking behind me. Angelo, you got to turn off your mic. Okay, in any event, so what happened was that these girls, what is there that he didn't understand about turning off the mic? So these 2 girls went to the party. There was alcohol at the party. The next morning, when they went to wake one of them up, she was dead. At the autopsy, it showed that she had a blood alcohol of about 0.45. And the question was, what is 0.45? As I think you saw from what they showed, 0.45, at about, when you get up to the high 3s, your systems start to shut down, your nervous system. So she died. We have these 2 identical twins died. Now, you should ask yourself, how could that have happened? And I'm going to tell you how it happened, and I want you to listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. The killer's vodka. I call vodka the co-ed killer, and here's how it works. You've got your linebacker with the cheerleader on his arm. There, the linebacker is older, he's a drinker. And what is his drink of choice? It's beer. Okay, but she doesn't like beer, and so they make a concoction for her. The concoction is generally vodka and some type of fruit juice. So they get one of those plastic glasses, they put ice in it, they put fruit juice in it, they put about 3 shots of vodka in that glass. Okay, now, a shot of vodka has about the same alcohol content as a beer. Got the scenario? No? Now here's what occurs. The weight, if you didn't notice, did you notice there when they showed how the blood alcohol affects them? Their weight is significant. You see, alcohol in your system is based on the percentage of your blood. If you're a smaller person, and you're going to be much more affected by the same quantity of alcohol as a bigger person, because the alcohol is a less percentage in the smaller person's blood. Are you with me? Another factor that works into it is females, human females absorb alcohol faster than males. They don't know why, but that's a fact. Are you with me? So here's what's happening. Your linebacker boyfriend is weighing 230 pounds. The cheerleader on his arm weighs about 110 pounds. She's drinking a concoction that has 3 times the alcohol in it as his beer, and he's pacing her. They're drinking at the same rate. Every time she drinks one of these concoctions of fruit juice and vodka, she's consuming 6 times the alcohol as her boyfriend. And she's doing it fast. And so what happens, she gets real sleepy. She says, I think I need to lie down. And she dies. Now, the reason I wanted to tell you this story is Christmas time. And I will tell you this. I go to the funeral home, and I'm standing there, these people that I've known all my life, telling them how sorry I am. And then we walk up to the casket. Standing next to this casket is this beautiful young girl who's crying, shakes my hand, and I look over in the coffin, and there is her mirror image laying in that coffin. I will never get over that. And I wanted to tell you that story because what I'm telling you is very real. Now, you may drive and you may not drive, but a lot of you very nice-looking young Catholics might decide to have a New Year's Eve party in about a week or so, and you're going to be served alcohol. And all I'm going to tell you is when you consume that alcohol, watch out. Watch it. It can kill you, whether you drive or not. Now, I'm sorry I told this story, but the reason I told this story is I made a vow when I was looking at that young girl in the coffin that I would never pass up an opportunity to tell young people how dangerous alcohol is if you don't know what you're doing. Thank you very much.
So, let's pick our chin up and get ready for a holiday, but let's do something. Let's, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? But what can I do? I don't know about you, but I don't know about Mr. Lindsay or this young prosecutor, but as long as I have the breath of life in me that God gave me, I will keep saying, don't do this, and warn as many people as possible. So this last song we're going to play before Mr. Lynn dismisses you for your vacation, and we're going to ask you to please pay attention to the words. If anybody wants to buy it, it's available anywhere. But I think it says it all, and it sets up our mock trial on April 25th, Friday, in which if we get enough of a good response, we're going to have an adult version of the trial with Mr. Lindsay trying the case, real trial at night as well as during the day on April 25th. So if nothing else, get people to come to that trial. And we're ready for our music, and then Mr. Lynn, I won't come back to the podium. You'll just dismiss them as you see fit. And we thank you so much for your attention and hope you have a God-filled, blessed Christmas.